Hi, thanks for stopping by. This is a modified version of a presentation that I did earlier this year for a group of pre-service teachers at Western. And so the purpose of this presentation is just to talk about the kinds of things that I do as a teacher involving technology in the classroom. So for introductions, I just thought I'd be clever and put on this little symbol here, which is actually an example of a QR code. And if you're not familiar with QR codes, what they are is they're kind of modified versions of barcodes, and they can be used to store information. So if you have a smartphone with a QR reader app installed, you can take a picture of this and you'll have all my contact information. And if not, you can just look at this. So I currently teach at Central Elgin Collegiate Institute, which is in St. Thomas, Ontario. I went to school at Western for both my undergrad and my B.Ed. I'm doing my master's right now at UOIT out of Oshawa, and I've been teaching for 8 years. I was a learning coordinator at the board office for Thames Valley District School Board in the area of literacy, and I'm really into technology. I have an online presence in a number of different ways. I write a blog, and that's where you're watching this presentation right now. I'm on Twitter, and I'm also involved in a number of social networking sites that are geared at teachers, and I occasionally run, as you can see from that picture. So I thought I'd start off by talking a little bit about how I got interested in using technology in the classroom, because I haven't always been a techie. I was probably one of the last of my friends to actually buy a cell phone. So 3 years ago, I worked at the board office as a learning coordinator, and part of my portfolio was literacy. And so one of the things that I was looking into was how technology could be used to engage students and improve their literacy skills. So, as I did some reading in that area, one of the papers I came across was a paper by Kathleen Blake Yancey called Writing in the 21st Century. And based on that and some of the other reading that I did, I came up with sort of these main conclusions. The first one being that students needed to have an authentic audience for their writing. Students are doing a lot of composing outside of the classroom, but they don't necessarily think of it as writing. This could be something like composing something on a friend's Facebook page or commenting on a YouTube video. Now, the question right now, or I guess the idea here is not that necessarily they're doing these things well, but these are the types of communication they engage in outside the classroom. So then when they come inside the classroom and we ask them to take out a pen and a piece of paper and write something down that only the teacher sees, that's not authentic. That's not an authentic writing experience for them. And these kinds of activities that we do are more like playing the game of school rather than real life reading and writing exercises that these students are doing every day. Now, the idea of personalization didn't necessarily come out of Yancey's paper, but it came out of some of the other stuff that I was reading. And that's that a lot of our students expect to be able to personalize their experience of communication. So you see this in everything from the way that they will personalize their cell phones or their binders even, or their lockers. The internet allows for a lot of personalization, and how much of that do we actually offer in terms of the way that we teach in the classroom? How much do we let our students personalize their learning experiences? Students also come to expect that they should be able to access information anywhere, anytime. And I know the issue of equity will probably come up again and again in your discussions about technology in the classroom. And I'm not going to get too much into that right now, but even with the ability to log on to a computer in a library, they expect to be able to access information anywhere, anytime, and it's becoming more and more ubiquitous. So the idea of limiting the learning that we do just to the short amount of time that they're actually physically in our classroom is not particularly compatible with what they're used to experiencing now. Collaboration is one of the skills that will come up a lot in reading about 21st century skills. It's very difficult for us to imagine the kinds of jobs that our students are going to get as they leave high school and university or college. And so to try to prepare them for the workforce, to try to prepare them for jobs that exist today, is not terribly forward thinking. But one of the general skills that seems to have reached a consensus on is that students need to be able to collaborate really well. And Web 2.0 technology allows for that in a lot of meaningful ways, not just collaborating with the other students in the classroom, but students could be collaborating with other people all over the world. So these main things, authentic audience, personalization, collaboration, and anywhere, anytime learning, will lead to engagement. And so my whole goal was to find ways to combine these ideas and engage students. And keep in mind here, we're not talking about entertaining students. Sure, if students are engaged, it could be something that's entertaining, but there is a difference. You could be entertained and not engaged in meaningful activity. So this is what led me to using social network sites in the classroom. And it's not the only thing that I use in the classroom. It's just that it kind of provides a nice framework for talking about some of these ideas. So one of the first things I wanted to do when I got back in the classroom was find ways to use social network sites. And of course, the main social network sites that our students use would be Facebook. And I couldn't use Facebook in the classroom because Facebook was banned on school computers. And there were a number of other issues too with using Facebook that I won't get into because you probably are familiar with a lot of them. What I wanted to use Facebook for, though, was having my students do role-playing activities where they created what would a Facebook page look like for Jay Gatsby or Daisy Buchanan when we were studying The Great Gatsby. And so since I couldn't use Facebook, I was looking for another alternative, and that led me to a format called Ning. Ning is an online platform that lets you create your own social networking site, and you can have that open to anybody, or you can have it only open to the people that you invite. So what we used it for was creating the Gatsby Ning, which was a social network site if it were around during the 1920s. And I had my students create pages for different characters and interact with each other on this site. So this is a picture from one of my students' pages. He played Nick Carraway, and you can see this is what his profile page looked like. You can see a couple of his status updates. And while this was a really interesting activity, if you think about Bloom's taxonomy and where this would fit in terms of the level of thought, this was fairly lower order thinking. The students definitely had to have knowledge and they had to be able to apply that knowledge. I don't know how much synthesis and evaluation was happening in this activity though. And I could see that there was a lot of potential though for synthesis and evaluation level thinking. So I tried to think about what else I could do with this site. On this site, there are a number of other features. It's not just like Facebook, but there are also, you have the ability to create a blog and create groups just like you can on Facebook. So I thought this would be a really nice extension of the literature circle groups that we were doing with my grade 12 English class. So I created a site that would extend our literature circles beyond the physical space of the classroom, which was really effective because in my grade 12 college level English class, I had a number of challenges and different levels of ability. And there were some students who were really reluctant to participate in oral discussions, but then through their participation on our book club site, I was able to see that they actually did have a lot to say and they were able to interact and contribute in meaningful ways. I also created a site for my grade 12 university level English class, and they made more use of the blogging features, and I actually spent time explicitly teaching students the conventions of blogging. We talked about things like using Creative Commons referenced images. So that means using pictures that they had the rights to use, how to credit the creators of images, how to embed video if they wanted to, how to use hyperlinks so that they were crediting the sources in a way that was appropriate for this medium, how to tag blog posts so that it was easier for their classmates to be able to find posts about similar topics. And so you can see in this picture here, this is a clipping from one of my students' blog posts about the book 3-Day Road. The part that's circled here, these are tags, these are keywords. And then the little cutout at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, that's a list of different tags sort of grouped all together. So if I wanted to see who else wrote about the concept of animals, then I could click on that and it shows me that there are 2 blog posts that have that as a keyword. Or if I wanted to look at tradition, I could find 3 blog posts that had that as a keyword. So in the end, students ended up creating a very traditional assignment, which was a comparative essay. But the way in which they got to that comparative essay was using a lot of 21st century skills. And using sites like this was really important because I think what I wanted to show students was how collaborating and working together could improve their final product. I tried to show them how choosing the right tool for the job was a really important thing to be able to do. They commented on each other's blog posts, so I wanted them to think about being willing to accept new ideas and reconsider their original positions. And the technology that was in place using Ning made this kind of discussion and thinking possible. So could we have done this without the technology? Yes, but would we have been as likely to? Probably not. So the medium really is the message. The medium allowed us to do a lot of different things that traditional pen and paper would have been really difficult to do. This picture here is meant to represent the kinds of collaboration that I was able to do with a teacher in another school. So my school is down here at B, that's St. Thomas, and I collaborated with a teacher who is at A up there in Listowel. And we put both of our media classes on the same social network site. So my students collaborated with Ms. Weir's students. And this was a really interesting experiment and a fantastic one, I think, because the thing that I found really amazing was that the students were much more willing to take risks and engage in positive ways with students that they hadn't met before. And I thought this was kind of interesting because what it said to me was that there was an importance in partial anonymity. So we all knew, the teachers knew who all the students were, and the students did use their real names, so they couldn't hide behind a fake identity. So they had to behave in socially responsible ways, and that was something we taught and modeled in the classroom. But because there was this sort of, they were one step removed, they felt freer to express themselves, I think, without being judged. So there were some really interesting and honest discussions that happened on our social network site that I've just never seen before in the classroom. And while I think it would be fantastic if they had these kinds of discussions in the classroom too, I'm not sure that they would have felt as comfortable doing that yet. So this really opened up some interesting possibilities. It was really cool to see how positive and supportive these students were with other kids that they'd never actually met before. And this raises there are a number of issues that you're probably thinking of, cyberbullying and things like that, and I'll get to that a little bit later. So some of the other tools we use in the classroom. We have a class website and blog. So every day I update our blog posts. It's basically the lesson plan for the day is online, and that takes me, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes to do. It's something I've gotten in the habit of. In the same way that some teachers will write something down in a day book, I write it on my blog. So that's just my way. it's been fantastic for me because as I go through and I want to plan and modify for next year, I can see everything that I did every day for that semester. My website is kind of like the home base for everything, and I update that once a semester. It doesn't get updated daily, but I bought my own domain name, and so this is where I kind of house everything. It's like a big filing cabinet for me. We use Google Calendars. So some of my students actually use Google Apps quite a lot, and so they sync their personal calendars with the class calendar so that anytime I put an update about when things are due, they get a message. Not all of the students make use of that, but the point is that it's available for them if they want to do it. We use this a little bit, iGoogle. iGoogle is a personalized Google homepage, which kind of it'll follow you wherever you go if you log into Google. So it doesn't matter whether you're on your home computer or a school computer. And I've shown students how they can use an RSS feed if they're doing research. So you can see there at the Arizona shooting from Google News, that anytime a new story got posted about that, it would be pushed to this box on my iGoogle homepage. And there are a lot of other cool apps that you can have on there. Edmodo, if you're a little bit uncomfortable with the idea of using a social network site that is not necessarily designed for education, then Edmodo might be a little bit more in your comfort zone because it's specifically designed for education. I used it more for posting assignments and allowing students an online way to submit assignments. And they've been making a lot of changes recently, and it's a pretty cool site that I would recommend checking out for sure. There's even a parent feature now, so parents can be part of your site as well, and then it's only open to the students and parents, but it can be a way to get parents involved, which is pretty cool. Diigo is a social bookmarking site. So in the same way that you can have bookmarks on your browser on your computer, but these bookmarks are stored in the cloud. So again, that means you can access them from anywhere. And one of the really cool things about Diigo is that you can create groups. So as my students have been doing research, I would create groups for them that they could save their bookmarks to. And rather than having them give me paper copies of their research notes, I'm able to see their bookmark pages with highlights and annotations, and they can access those anywhere. Prezi is a presentation tool, an online presentation tool that's a lot more interesting and engaging than PowerPoint, and my kids have made some really cool Prezis this year. It's something that I would definitely recommend checking out if you're going to have students do multimedia presentations in class. And VoiceThread. VoiceThread allows you to upload pictures, and then you can draw on those pictures and you can record comments. And then you can send somebody the link and they can also comment on what you've posted. So my students have used this to analyze movie posters. But we've also used it to do kind of lectures on Hamlet and then have students post their own questions or their own ideas. I've also known teachers who have used this as a kind of portfolio for their students, and then they can invite even, parents to come in and make comments on their child's portfolio, which is pretty cool. Okay, so now we'll get to the issues. One of the things that I didn't anticipate when I started using technology in the classroom was that I would get resistance from students, because my initial assumption was, well, if they're doing this all the time anyway, outside of class, then this would be a natural fit. I wouldn't even have to, explain why I was doing it. It would just get me immediate buy-in. And I was really wrong, especially with academic students, for lack of a better term. So students who are used to being very successful with traditional activities in the classroom were very uncomfortable when I introduced activities that they weren't familiar with, because they were worried that they didn't know how to get an A with this particular assignment. So what this suggested to me was a couple of things. First of all, you have to have a very clear rationale about why you're choosing a particular tool. So I have some really clear reasons now about why I want students to blog as opposed to write a private journal entry. If they have to write it as a blog, that means that they have to think more carefully about what it is that they mean to say, because they have to express it in such a way that their audience will understand, not just the teacher. They also have to um, be willing to stand behind what they say. And it also engages the students in a conversation. So the idea here is that once you write it, you're not done with it. You have to uh, reconsider new ideas, and you have to be willing to either defend or suggest something new. Um, and this was the idea of this sort of being an ongoing work, that it wasn't a traditional published piece of writing, was really important. So it allowed for collaboration. And there were lots of other reasons too, but that just sort of gives you a starting point. You also have to, if you're anytime you're trying something new, and this doesn't have anything to do with technology, you have to be willing to give them the opportunity to play and experiment before you decide you're going to grade it. Because the second you start attaching marks to things, their willingness to take risks and experiment shuts down completely. You also have to keep in mind that these are just tools. Okay, so it in the same way that when you're building a house, you have to choose the right tool for the job. You can't just choose that orange drill because it's shiny and cool looking. If you're not trying to put a hole in something, then don't use a drill. That's a bad analogy, but I think you get the idea. Cyberbullying. One of my expectations was that the second I had students participating in online forums, their inhibitions would disappear and their immediate reaction would be to write negative, nasty things. And so I was really worried about how I was going to deal with that and really careful. And the funny thing is that really wasn't an issue at all. My students had to use either a first name and last initial, never use their full name on public sites. But they knew that I knew who they were. And so I think the fact that there was some partial anonymity made them free enough to be more willing to express themselves. But because I knew who they were, they couldn't completely hide behind that fake identity that might let them say things that were not acceptable to say. So what I ended up finding actually was that the risks that students took in the classroom were very positive risks. So while they, might not be as willing to say something nice to another student's face, they were more comfortable writing it. So I had students interacting online that wouldn't necessarily interact in the classroom, and then later on that actually led to social interaction that might not have happened before. So the assumption is often that students are going to do the worst, but it was kind of nice for me to see that the opposite was actually true. So I kind of talked about that already. The perception of anonymity doesn't necessarily lead to negative things. It can also lead to positive things. So you have to think about how you're going to foster that positive interaction that might come from partial anonymity. Here's an example of it. So here are two students commenting back and forth on blog posts about the role of women in Hamlet. And you can see how the one student has commented on a blog post, and then another student has replied to those comments. So to me, this is a lot richer than a student just writing a journal entry and handing it in to me, and me writing a few comments back to them, because now the students are having a conversation about these ideas. And I think that's a lot more rewarding, because I think they did value some of my input and I did comment on the blog posts, I think that the feedback that they got from their peers was a lot more valuable to them. This picture is meant to represent shyness. And a lot of people will ask me, well, what if you have a student who's not comfortable having his or her writing read by another classmate? Like, why should that shouldn't affect their mark? And I get that, and I think that's true. But it's funny because these are the same students who will write on each other's Facebook pages and have no problems writing outside of class. But the second it's for marks, then they're nervous about their peers judging them. So what I've done is I've said, if you're not comfortable with having everybody in the class reading your writing right now, then that's fine, because there's a way that we can change your settings on the names so that your blog posts are only visible to the people that you're comfortable having see them. But one of my students who was very, very shy and very reluctant at first started off like that and then opened up her blog posts, because what she found was that while she thought that people were going to be very judgmental and say maybe critical things about her writing, her peers were actually very supportive, and that actually encouraged her to write more. So this was her blog post that she wrote at the end of the year. I had her for 2 semesters, so she was blogging for almost a whole year because I had her in media and grade 11 English. And and you can just see sort of that's the beginning of her blog post there. So she goes on to kind of write about how she developed a lot of confidence through blogging and through the support of her peers, even though at first it was something she was really opposed to. So I guess the reason why I wanted to share this is because don't be so worried if you get pushback from the students initially. That doesn't mean that it's not worth continuing trying, because I was really frustrated when I started to get pushback because I thought, oh, this is a wonderful idea. They're going to buy in and they're going to love it. And the point isn't necessarily whether or not they love it. It's, are they learning? Are they getting something valuable out of it? And once I gave it time, I did get to reap the rewards from that, and so did the students. A lot of people also ask about distractions and technologies being a distraction. And I think that this multitasking that students do, whether they do it effectively or not, it's not going away. So I think we need to start teaching them strategies for that. And I also have strategies for dealing with technology in the classroom, just sort of little classroom management things. So when I'm working in a lab, for example, and I need to get the students' attention, they all know that as soon as I ask for their attention, they have to turn their monitors off. And that works really well. And so there are lots of just little tricks like that that you can pick up along the way that will help. I also get this a lot. So people saying, oh, well, isn't texting and all of this stuff ruining the way that they write? Well, studies have shown that it doesn't. And so one of the things that I work on is talking about using the right language in the right medium. So if you're on Twitter, short forms are not only acceptable, but they might be necessary because you only have 140 characters to express yourself. But when you're writing a blog post, that's not the same as texting. And so I shouldn't be seeing text message speak in a blog post. And it's an important discussion to have. So it's not that, short forms are always wrong. It's about who is your audience? What is it that you're trying to achieve? What is the best way to express your ideas in that particular medium? So just embrace it and go with it. Privacy. A lot of people are very concerned about this. And I am actually moving towards wanting to have the Ning that I use in the classroom completely open to the public, because I feel like if I'm trying to teach my students how to be good digital citizens, but I make the site into a walled garden where the only people who can access it are the students enrolled in the classroom, that's kind of an artificial way to do it. So it's something that I've been giving a lot of thought to, but it's really important, I think, as teachers that we teach our students how to have a positive online presence while not revealing too much personal information online. And again, if we think that our students aren't doing this kind of stuff outside of our classroom, then we're kidding ourselves. And so if we don't teach them, who's going to? The Ontario College of Teachers recently came out with a social media advisory that I know a lot of people immediately thought was saying, oh, okay, well, we can't use social network sites at all, and we can't be on Facebook, and we can't use Twitter. And that's not what it says at all. It actually comes up with some pretty decent guidelines in terms of establishing boundaries and engaging as a professional online. So as a teacher, I don't friend students on Facebook, which is in keeping with the social media advisory. However, I do know boards, including the Waterloo board, that use Facebook in the classroom. So what they do is they've created pages for the classes, so that if you like a page, that doesn't mean you're friends with the teacher. It just means that you're able to see the information that's on the page. And I've done a little bit of experimenting with using Facebook in this way in the classroom. My students didn't necessarily buy into it though. Because I think maybe just because we had other sources that we were using in the same way. But that's sort of one way that you can do it. You can get around it that way. I think the most important thing to keep in mind, though, in terms of being a teacher and having an online presence, is that you would never say anything in an online forum that you wouldn't say in front of the students in your classroom. So it's really just using common sense, and don't be stupid. So don't think that because you have your Facebook privacy settings really high, that means that you are completely protected. Don't post stupid things online. Okay, just don't do it. Don't say stupid things in your classroom, and then we'll be fine. We'll be good. The thing that I'm finding with Web 2.0 and using social media and social network sites and all of this stuff is that it really does change the way that you have to teach. So, whether you decide that you're going to be incorporating this stuff in the classroom or not, you have to recognize that students have all of these avenues available to them if they want to learn something. You are no longer the keeper of all knowledge. And the good thing about that is that you don't have to be. So don't put this pressure on yourself to be the expert in anything or everything. Because through things like Twitter, if I don't know something, what I do know is how to find that information out. And that's, I think, a really important 21st century skill. So if I want to learn something about how to embed content into a blog post and I don't know how to do that, I go to my personal learning network on Twitter. I put the question out there and I can find people to help and support me. So my personal learning network on Twitter is kind of like the staff room times 100. So there are lots of experts out there who can help me. Or I could even Skype someone into the classroom to talk to my students about something that I don't know, a whole lot about. So that can be a kind of scary shift, though, for a teacher to go from, expecting to be the sage on the stage and the person that has all the answers to being willing to show that you're not always sure, you're not always the expert about everything, and you're okay with that because you know how to find the information. And so I think we need to start modeling that more in the classroom. I think we need to give students the opportunities to be the experts. We need to show students that we are fallible and that we make mistakes, and that what's important is that we know how to recover from those mistakes. I think those are all really, really good things to model for our students. So some tips for you. Blog. I've been blogging since 2008 professionally, and I've found that it's really critical for my professional development. It gives me the ability to not only reflect on things, but also get input and feedback from my peers who read my blog posts. So when I write a blog post, I tweet about it. And then over time, I've gotten more readers, and they've given me a lot of support and a lot of great ideas over the years. And tweet, obviously. Twitter is an incredible resource for teachers, and I've written some blog posts about Twitter and why I think teachers should be on Twitter. It's, if nothing else, to get support from your peers. But I've found that the best professional development I've done online was through Twitter. So somebody will post a link to something that I'm interested in. I'm able to follow that link and get new ideas. It's fantastic, and I highly recommend getting on Twitter. Don't follow Charlie Sheen. Follow some teachers. Join a social networking site that's set up for teachers. This is the Educators PLN. There are lots of other ones out there, though. This is a Ning, and it's kind of like dedicated Facebook. So Facebook that's dedicated to learning. There's also the English Teachers Companion, which is a Ning set up for English teachers. So, and you'll be able to find help and support for just about anything you want to do. It doesn't have to be related to technology. The biggest thing that I've come away with over the past few years is to take risks, because if you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original. If we just keep doing the same thing over and over again, we're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. You're not going to find any innovation. Watch Sir Ken Robinson's videos and read his book, The Element. It's fantastic. So, some resources for you. Media literacy resources, and I'll make sure that the links for all of these are live and embedded in the blog post just underneath this video. The Media Awareness Network is one that I use all the time. These other ones are useful as well. Blogs that I would highly recommend reading. Dangerously Irrelevant is a fantastic one. My friend Royan writes the Spicy Learning blog. It's great. Weblog Ed has actually moved, but you can still use that link. It will take you to a new link, and that's Will Richardson's blog. Free Technology for Teachers is one of those great ones where if you just want to find out about a new piece of technology that might be useful for you. New teacher resources. So the Educators PLN Ning is a Ning set up specifically for new teachers. And the Tools for the 21st Century Teacher link is a whole list of different links that will be useful for you. And if you want to get on Twitter, one of the big things that people ask is, well, who do you follow? Well, here are some suggestions of people that I would highly recommend following. And these are all people who are very helpful and supportive. A lot of these people are people that I've met in person, and some of them are people that I would just really like to meet in person. And you'd be amazed. So get on there, follow these people, send them a message, say I sent you.